Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. I am Cammy back in the host seat, and I'm still getting to grips with all the buttons I've got to press because I've just had me and Johnny covered up by our big banner. I'll get back into it. John's done a good job. It's been a while, yeah. So in that there you can hear Johnny McGinty. Good evening, Johnny.
Good evening. How are we doing?
Podcast tonight. If you are watching live, then you'll be watching live on either YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, or Facebook. Say hello to anybody who's there from our Hugh Dan's Fans secret Facebook group for our Patreons. If you want to sign up for bonus weekly content, go to patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast or search for Scottish Rugby Podcast, and you can sign up from £3 a month. And because of that, you then get a bonus weekly episode. I'm going to start with a little bit of a trigger warning for this podcast for people that might be tuning in. I don't want anybody to be surprised later on. For people who have been following the news closely, Rufus McLean has pled guilty to domestic abuse charges in the last couple of days. We will be discussing that later on the main podcast. That's likely to go into the Patreon podcast itself. So I'm making people aware that we are going to be discussing that in this episode. So anybody affected by those issues, there is a link in the podcast description and on the video descriptions to where you can get help if you're affected by any of those issues. However, we are going to start with some news. We're waiting Craig. We're going to talk about the Thistles as well in the main podcast. Then we'll talk a little bit about the issues around the Rufus McLean guilty plea. And then in the Patreon podcast, we'll talk about the Scotland Six Nations men's squad selections. We're not putting that behind the paywall for any other reason than we think the Rufus McLean thing raises a lot of issues we think are worthwhile talking about. We want to celebrate women's rugby as well. We think that's really important, obviously. And to be honest, the men's squad announcement, as fun as it is to talk about, is pretty low down the list of priorities this week. So we're putting in the Patreon podcast for that reason. News though, Johnny. Glasgow are almost through to the last 16 of the what was it John called it, the Clown Cup?
Yeah, the Mickey Mouse Cup.
Mickey Mouse Cup because Bristol got some admin wrong.
Hang on, Glasgow were through to the last 16 anyway on their own merit. But they are basically guaranteed. Well, as good as no, I'm not going to say that. They need 1 point tomorrow night against Bath to be guaranteed a home last 16 game. It was previously a little bit more complex than that. We were waiting on results across the rest of the competition, but then, Bristol got docked 5 points for fielding Elliot Stook twice in the early rounds when he was ineligible. Like, once is careless, twice. So he played in both of their first two games, and they've been docked 5 points for that. And now Glasgow need 1 point against Bath tomorrow night for a home game.
Yeah. It's a strange one. I can understand where the rule's there, but from what I can understand, is he was obviously made redundant by Wasps, so Bristol have picked him up on a temporary contract, but he has signed a longer-term contract with a club in France, and that they had an exception for the fact he'd come from Wasps, I think, but now because he signed on long-term somewhere else, it's
it's a big old mess, and I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of fairly obvious administrative errors going on around Bristol. So although this one isn't really their fault, it's kind of symptomatic of what's happening at the club in general, I think.
Yeah, we've got John McDonald and Dougie. They'll point out that he was eligible, then became ineligible after he went elsewhere. Retrospectively ineligible is what's happened. But yeah, I guess that was... If there was always, given he was on a short-term contract, there was always a chance he was going to be retrospectively ineligible, and they probably should have thought about that rather than just throwing him on the pitch without checking the paperwork. Admin is important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get your admin right. Always get your admin right.
Yeah. We've got somebody else. So you've got the Glasgow Bath game tomorrow. away. Do you think you're going to get a point?
Home tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I lose track. You think
we should get a point from it, at least.
Yeah.
I feel like Glasgow's performances have been good enough.
Yeah. Losing bonus point? Is that what you're hoping for? I'm getting the digs in because Craig's not here yet.
You feel like you've got to do it for him?
I feel like I'm just trying to get balance.
I feel like I'd be extremely disappointed with a losing bonus point, but at least we'd have a homeless 16 game.
Yeah.
I think a team that's got 14 from a possible 15 from the first 3 matches could probably manage a point at home against Bath, is what I would say.
Yeah, we'd hope so. The other bits of news then were Murray McCallum signed for Edinburgh, which is, it's lovely to see that he's got a contract, and that's great. And it's taken a while, I think, for him to find something. You would imagine that's down to some Scotland shenanigans of we really, really need props.
Yeah, I mean, given the timing of his contract and stuff, I fully expected him to see him in the Scotland squad. I was quite surprised.
Yeah,
because like, when the whole Ben Healy thing happened, it was very obvious that was being done when it was being done because we're desperate for a 10 as well. I thought it was the same theory with Murray, but apparently not.
No, but it's time for him. It's a good move for Edinburgh and for him. Mm-hmm. So good to see him back in Scotland. Interestingly, there's obviously been an identified need for more props in Scotland because they've started prop school. Why they haven't called it prop? I don't know why they haven't called it prop idol. They've called it prop school. So the SIU are launching this. Basically, they're looking for that. They want to kind of encourage more youngsters to be interested in the dark arts of the scrum, which is a hard.
They should just tell them you can eat as many chips as you want.
Well, this is it, right? Right. I'm not saying all props are fat lads. I'm not fat shaming anyone, but
it does help.
I do. Yeah. I mean, in these days of tackling childhood obesity, is that the underlying? Is our public health campaigns to blame for the lack of props in Scotland?
The people behind Healthy Living Scotland are so good at their jobs that we've got no props left.
It's the fat tax. That's what it is. Putting fat tax in sweets.
Sugar tax. Blame the sugar tax. Yeah. I'm glad we're getting this anyway before Craig appears as well.
Yeah, sugar tax. That's what's done it. That's why we don't have any props anymore. That's why we have to go and get South Africans in. Do they have a sugar tax in South Africa?
6p for Coke.
Yeah, that's it. A tax on deep fried food. So you can't. You're not gonna bring through. This is. See, I feel right old. This is show my. I feel like I'm getting into the kind of grumpy. You can't. You can't produce props on spinach and hummus from a woke mob. It's the woke mob, Johnny. It's the woke mob. That's the reason why we don't have props.
Why didn't we think of this before?
Yeah, quinoa
with their bloody avocado toast.
Yeah, never seen a prop. You never get a prop on avocado toast and quinoa.
I bet Ollie Kebble eats avocado toast.
I would imagine he does. Hey, it's a high-fat food.
True.
Avocado. So it's not a bad thing to eat as a prop. It's good prop food. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know who they're trying to. I don't know. I don't know if it's just kind of come along, kids, and look how fun it is to push against one another for a bit. You get to walk around the pitch.
They heard the conversation I had with Craig last week where he said he hasn't decided what he's going to do coaching-wise and rugby-wise next season yet, and decided that we just make scrum school for him to go and do that.
Go and do that, yeah. Hey, kids, if you ever fancy playing walking rugby, be a prop.
Do you like pushing stuff and walking?
Yeah. And eating all you want with no judgment at all. Be a prop. Yeah. Your country needs you. That's what we need to post as is kind of Pierre Schumann with a big. In fact, do you remember that there's that episode of The Simpsons where Homer tries to become obese and Dr. Nick says, if the paper goes clear, it's good. That's essentially the nutritionist's advice in prop school. It's Dr. Nick's advice. If you're rubbing on a bit of paper, it's not going clear. So that's, I mean, it's good in a way. We've been, I mean, God, since this podcast started, since I started writing for the blog, God, more than 10 years ago, we've been talking about a lack of Scottish props. And then we get to a point where we're going, oh, good, we got Xander now. And then it's like, well, we've only got Xander. And then, oh, we've got Ollie Kebble and Pierre Schumann. And and then WP now, you realize it's suddenly 72. You go, all right, things are looking a bit shaky. I think the main problem with props is it's the lack of game time. I'm going to keep the prop chat going. So I'm hoping is Craig will join us, and then I'm literally going to move on as soon as Craig comes on this podcast.
The first thing that he hears is us going, anyway, that's enough about props.
Yeah. But it's a strange one, because I think the problem that props have had in Scotland, particularly Glasgow and Edinburgh, is it's like that lack of consistent game time, because it's such a rare, it's not a versatile position. As we're told numerous times, you can't switch sides of a scrum, apparently. It's different pushing. But because it's not like, you can get your game time as a fullback winger, because you play fullback wing maybe on the centre. Sometimes you fly off or shift to 12. It's harder for a prop to get that game time in the same way that other positions might move around or be given chances elsewhere. And I think we've had so many good props that have just disappeared or fallen flat. And I don't think they're necessarily bad. It's just they never get into a good vein of form where they're able to get better, I guess.
Yeah. And the thing is that, like, it is, I'm glad he's not here to hear me say this. It is such hard work that they do, like, they're the first to come off. They're off after 50 minutes. It's not like you're playing a whole game ever. Your props are always the first two to get subbed. So you're looking at like 50 minutes every 2 or 3 weeks if your squad's been rotated, and that is not enough to get really good, I don't think.
Yeah. Harley Worthy, hello Harley, says we've got Javan Sebastian, the best prop in the UK, 100%.
How does that you think? I prefer not to speak.
He's not going to get here in time. It's really disappointing. I
know. Like, I feel like we've said all we can about props.
Props, yeah. That's we've exhausted our prop knowledge, Johnny. After the last time we did a podcast,
prop knowledge before, yeah.
I think the last time you and I were on together, we were just going, which one's the right and which one's the loose.
I'm sure someone explained this to me once, and I can't remember. Now I can't remember. And
it's like righty tighty, lefty loosey. That's unscrewing stuff. So that's how unscrew a jolly that's got no application in rugby.
I can mostly remember which side most of the Scottish props play now as well. I've been doing my prop homework.
Oh, well, that's good.
I think so.
Let's have a look, see if we've got any other news. Dave Cherry signed the new Edinburgh deal.
Siori Tuipulotu signed a new Glasgow deal as well. Some good signings.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. So that's and in the grand matrix of Scottish Rugby contract extension bingo, it's I think 3 years is my guess.
Yeah, foreseeable future, isn't it? It's 3 years.
Foreseeable future. Yeah, anything more than that, I think, is exceptional or kind of world breaking. They call it. That's what they said for Jamie Ritchie or something. But yeah. Foreseeable future is 3 years.
Is it not like 1 committed as future, 2 long term, 3 foreseeable future? Is that right?
Yeah, foreseeable is 3. I think long term 2, extended 1.
Extended is 1. Yeah.
Extended is 1. Yeah. The 4, I think 4 you're in Hamish Watson and Jamie Ritchie territory.
Yeah.
I think Jamie Ritchie's was 5. So that was the longest ever in the club's history kind of territory.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's a good signing for Glasgow, because it's interesting. I think everyone got very excited when he came in to Glasgow, and because of his highlight reels, and he threw some lovely moves. But it's one of those ones where, as a player, and what's exciting about him is you can see him getting better with every game he plays. He's obviously learned a lot since coming to Scotland. He's absorbed, and he is demonstrably a better player than he was when he kind of made his Scotland debut.
Yeah. He's probably had the best year of anybody in the Scotland squad, or in the wider Scotland squad, I think. From the Six Nations last year, where he was all right. I don't think anybody was really blown away by him. I think in the Wales game last year, there were people who were quite disappointed in him. I think a lot of Glasgow fans liked him at the start of last season. I think in the autumn, he kind of really showed up as being one of the star performers. And then basically since then, he's kicked on massively. Like since the European the European games started, kind of just after the autumn, he's been Glasgow's best player by a fairly long way, to be honest. He's really, really come on this year. So nice to have him sticking around for a while.
The question is he a 12 or a 13? Has that question been answered yet? Because it was something I think, was he doing 13 for Glasgow and 12 for Scotland at one point?
Yeah. When Sam Johnson was kind of regularly playing 12, Sione was playing 13. Now he seems to be playing more at 12 for Glasgow, which you'd imagine is where he's going to be playing for Scotland.
Yeah.
And he's been doing it really well. And he's apparently developed an absolutely world-class kicking game from 12 as well.
Which we'll get onto the Scotland squad later, but that's always where Scotland have done well, even under Vern Cotter, is having a second kicking option from 12.
Yeah. The Calcutta Cup game must have been, was it 2021 that we won at Twickenham?
Yeah.
Was with Cam Redpath playing 12 and kind of spraying it about a bit.
Yeah. So that will be interesting to see. The other thing is, in good news for Boomers, the Inter-District Championship for club players has returned.
Woohoo!
Districts.
Who doesn't love
Bring
the
back the districts. This is the yeah. So if the problem is now, if Scottish Rugby improves in any way, then why they brought back the districts.
See that? We've been saying all along, bring back the districts.
Bring back the districts. Abolish the pro teams and bring back the districts. That's what will make a good Scotland national team. Team of 15 amateurs from the districts. Put them up against England. They'll win any day. Yeah. Speaking of Boomers and the game's gone soft, the RFU have announced for a change to the laws for club level games from next season, where you have to tackle below the waist, which has caused mass outrage amongst the usual suspects on Twitter, but seems to be on the day that 55 amateur players have announced they're suing the RFU and World Rugby for brain injuries and long-term health impacts. Seems like a sensible thing to want to do in the club game to try and mitigate head injuries.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen all sorts of like official club accounts in England asking people if they want, like jokingly, obviously, asking people if they want to form a breakaway union. People saying they're turning in their registration. This is the last season they're going to play and stuff. And it's like, did you never get taught to tackle? Because I can remember clear as day, the very first time that I turned out to play rugby when I was like 11 or 12 years old, it goes eye to thigh, cheek to cheek. That's how we've always been taught to tackle. Aim for the badge on their shorts. When we get the tackle tubes out even today, and they say Rhino on them, obviously, because that's what the kind of tackle tubes everybody's got, and they say that you aim for the N. Like, I've always, in 20 plus years, always been taught to tackle round the waist, get your shoulder up against their thigh, wrap their legs up and push, because it doesn't matter how big somebody is. If you wrap their legs together and take them away, then they're going to fall down. So all these people that are like, I can't believe that they've done this to rugby, this is disgusting. Who taught you to tackle, and how long have you been tackling wrong for? Because you're meant to tackle around someone's legs. That's what it's always
literally been. When you see kids being coached in tackling for the first time, someone has a ball and the other person's on their knees, and you walk up slowly to them side by side, and the person on their knees tackles you, and that's just supposed to get you used to tackling and get the height right. It's not. Yeah, it's just in a way, I hope that some of these people do form a breakaway union, because that's how natural selection works.
Yep, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, it's not. There is a kind of there is a suggestion, and Dougie Lowe's alluded to this. Is that there's a lot of people kind of talk about this France experiment. Oh, actually, below the leg tackles causes more injuries. It doesn't cause more head injuries. I think that's the kind of that I've seen any evidence of. It may result in, there may have been a result in leg injuries for all we know, but it's ultimately it's the head that everyone's trying to protect here. It's not.
Yep.
We're not trying to protect the legs. You can, it's people's long-term mental health and mental well-being and ability to function as a human that we're trying to protect.
Most people say that, like, what happens is you get a knee to the head or you catch a leg in the head or something. So I will say once again, who taught you how to tackle and why were you not listening? Because the whole point is you're meant to get your head away from their knees. That's the idea. Yeah. I was taught when I was like 11 how to tackle without putting your head into somebody's knees or smash your shoulder into their face. And all these people are like, oh, this is disgusting. It's like, it's not. This is how it's always been.
Yeah, I'm not going to play rugby anymore because the game's gone, because I'm not allowed to tackle somebody in the face. It's just, it's unbelievable. It's a very sensible thing to do. And you would imagine that it's probably coming to Scotland. One of our patrons, and forgive me, I can't remember your name, said he's playing rugby in England and he's 6'5". Look, as a tall man, you've got my sympathy. Bending over is not easy, especially as a 40-year-old man, but life finds a way. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure you'll live. I'm sure you'll find another skill. If you're 6'5", I mean, what are you doing tackling anyway? Leave it to the
just do what I do and ask other people to do it.
Yeah, just put yourself in point yourself in charge of defense and just keep shifting out on the line and telling other pointing at rucks and telling people to get in there.
Yeah, like, I want to be perfectly clear that just because I have been coached in tackling and I know how to tackle doesn't mean I have any interest in doing it. I find ways to avoid having to do it, but I know how to do it.
That's like,
if you don't want to do it, there's ways to avoid it.
As my teacher once said, our geography teacher once told us, said, the best drivers don't put the brakes on. So the best rugby players don't need to tackle.
Yeah.
You just dazzle people with you distract them somehow. Close hand magic, that's what you do, Johnny, isn't it? Just pull a coin out the rear and they're so baffled you get the ball in your
sleight of hand tricks.
Yeah. So Craig's still not with us and it's past. So I think one of the things we wanted to talk about tonight, and hopefully Craig will be with us shortly to talk about this, is the Thistles squad has been announced. So the squad has been announced, but we've got so this is in effect the first Scottish women's pro team, and we've got a 37-player squad. Now, interestingly, and we didn't touch on this last week, but a couple of players have been signed by English clubs. So there is still, Johnny, and here's Craig, just in time.
Look at that. Perfect.
Yeah. So we
spoke about props for like 20 minutes, Craig.
Yeah. Just in the hope.
I've just seen Dougie Lowe putting 1 loose, 3 tight, which always makes me worry about what you've been talking about.
Yeah, we were good. The whole thing we dragged out for as long as we could because we were really hoping you'd come on and we just go, and that's enough about props. Let's move on. we muddled through, Johnny, didn't we? We're just talking about the Thistles, Craig. We've just started talking about it. We're pleased you joined us for this bit. I was saying to Johnny, obviously the squad's been announced today, but what was interesting in advance of that is a couple of players, and Ellis, who's been on this podcast previously, and when we did the episode on trans women in rugby, has now signed for sale. So it would seem like the SRU's policy is still, if we can get people contracts in Premier 15s, let's do that. And the pro team, the Thistles pro team, is for everybody else, and that might be people who, for whatever reason, don't feel that they want to move, which some people wouldn't, because understandably this is a new initiative, or for people who aren't able to get a contract within the Prem 15s. For you, Craig, is that still the right policy at this time while we're developing it? Is it a good thing that we're giving kind of players experience of going and playing in the Prem 15s where maybe it's a bit more competitive?
Yes, I think it's, as we see when we see a lot of our even just, for example, male Scotland players going to Gloucester or going to Saracens or whatever, you seem to see their game. It exposes them to different situations, but it also exposes them to more and more professional teams and different ways of working. So for me, I would encourage it as much as possible. It seems that a lot of the players who have gone, the Jade Conkles, etc., who have gone to the Premier 15s have improved and have moved on game more and more. So yeah, I like the Thistles. I like the idea of the Thistles because, for example, again, someone who's been on the pod, Rachel Law, is in the team, and it's going to give her the opportunity to play hopefully a higher level rugby and expose. If you excuse the terminology, but expose herself to more people so that she gets the more opportunities to be looked at and selected. And, because obviously she's a vet, so she's got her own career. But if she wants to go and play Premier 15s and then hopefully get back into the Scotland team, then it's a great opportunity.
So the squad then, so we've got a 37 player squad. We've got a new head coach in Claire Cruikshank, who's been announced, who was previously the Sweden women's head coach and has worked with the coaching group last year as part of the Rugby World Coach. We've got Chris Laidlaw, who is a Rugby Academy coach, and Stuart Corser, who's a performance coach. It's a bit, it's been touted, Johnny, as a bit of a kind of a Six Nations warm-up for the women, in that they're going to play the Welsh and the Irish development sides. So it's kind of almost like a mini URC, I guess. It's understandable, I guess, at this point in time that it's not that it's been cobbled together. That you've got three unions who have now in the in very, very recently committed to a women's professional rugby program. So it's maybe understandable, I guess, that this is being touted as a warm up to the Six Nations, but you would hope it would become something more permanent longer term.
Yeah, I think with the initial announcement, they said they wanted to have 2 teams from every country involved, which would be brilliant if we can get to that. It's kind of some meaningful competition week in, week out. If we can have enough players, obviously, because we are talking about people going to Premier 15s, and I know a lot of the Welsh squad have gone to Premier 15s as well. So it's a question of whether the player pool is there to make 2 squads. Are we going to start bringing people back? We got to look at then how the long-term funding and stuff goes for that. But I think it's a really good start. The fact that the tickets are free as well is brilliant. Hopefully there'll be some decent crowds there, because playing in front of a crowd, I think, is something that's quite kind of underrated in terms of how you prepare for things like the Six Nations, especially when crowds are getting huge for the Six Nations. Now, England have sold 30,000 tickets for their France game already. So you've got to kind of prepare yourself for the atmosphere as well.
Yeah. I think the one disappointing thing about it is that they haven't picked up a broadcaster for it, as far as I can see. Obviously, we had Viaplay now that was free sports before, that was picking up some of the women's game, and I don't know, for me that's going to be key going forward, that if it's, you need to somehow get this on the telly, and the SRU, they broadcast the Super 6 for free. They've managed to get broadcast deals for that. They've broadcast stuff on YouTube channels before, and that, for me, it's great. Let's get people along. You're right, Johnny, get people into the stadium, but I think making it available for people to watch as well is really important. And I know, Craig, it's something the URC have said it's their kind of number one thing they want to develop as a women's league. And the way to get people interested is to make it available for people to be able to see and to watch. And that's how you generate the interest in it.
Yeah, I just feel that especially the SRU should just treat it like a Super 6 game, and do go down the route of exactly what they did with the Super 6, even if it's just onto a YouTube channel or a streaming service, because I think anything, the minute people start seeing that, there's opportunity for sponsors to come in who then attract more of a TV audience as well, or want more of a TV audience. So it just kind of moves on from there. And I think it really should be kind of, I'm not saying everything with the Super 6 is ideal, but I think it should be treated like a Super 6 sort of team, because it is a mixture of professional and non-professional women going forward, And
the content's just so much better from the women's game, Johnny. I think that's unarguable, that you look at the stuff that was going on TikTok, you look at the stuff that they do on the social media channels, and I think you can... the men's game, I think, has hit a bit of a a glass ceiling, I think, if you will. It's, the men's game, I think, in Scotland is as popular as it's ever going to get. You're never going to get more popular than football, no matter how successful the team becomes. We've got Murrayfield almost full for most men's game, but I think the potential is there with the women's game to grow it. And I think I like the fact they're called the Thistles, for example. I think it's great that we've come, rather than calling it a combined, the regions combined 15 or whatever it is, the Irish have got the provinces, well, the Irish, the Thistles is got a nice ring to it. It's an identifiable, for want of a better expression, brand that people can get behind and start supporting.
Yeah, it's definitely the best branded of the three. Combined provinces 15 is what the Irish was called, and the Welsh was just called Development 15. Like, that is one thing, and I think I get the impression that like a lot of the TikTok stuff and that by the women's team is quite player driven. So I'd like to see them be a little bit more involved in it, or given the chance at least to be a bit more involved. Obviously, you've got a lot of other stuff to think about, but the women's players in the lead up to the World Cup and things like that came out with significantly better stuff on their own channels than Stuart Hogg hiding behind a door to scare Duhan van der Merwe. It's funny, but it was funny the first time, not so funny the like 8th time. Whereas the women's team, somebody like Rona Lloyd in particular, is just makes brilliant stuff just off her own back. And obviously, I think I get the impression that she's just like bored in the hotel. But I would like to see them be involved, a lot more.
And I think that's how you grow, isn't it? Because especially, I think, I'll show my age here again. This is the second time I've done it. Like young people, I remember being young Craig, and buying all getting my copy of Melody Maker or a copy of it. You get the program for the rugby, or you get Match, Shoot magazine or Roy the Road. You want to devour everything you can learn as a young person about the people you're interested in, and that's what's really important, I think, for young fans who want to get behind a Scottish women's pro team. Is they want to know the players. That's how you get people through, get them interested in the players. I'm not talking about sharing their national insurance numbers and their dates of birth. It's what are they interested in? What do they do? What do they like? What's their personality like? And I think that's, there's more personality in kind of, one women's player in Scotland at the minute than the entire Scotland men's squad, for example. They're much more entertaining. They're much more interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think also, and this is no disrespect to the Scottish women players who came before, because I know a lot of the Scottish women players who have come before, but it's a very new game, so you don't have a lot of this. Well, in my day, this is how we did it with women's rugby. It's more right. This is how we are going to do this, because the women's rugby has accelerated over the last 10 years from being hidden away and people not people not thinking it's the right thing, to all of a sudden we've now got this fantastic, these athletes coming through that are working hard and doing a great job. People are, we forget what the Blazers and the Slacks Brigade have missed out is that there's 50% of the population, including all of the young women that are out there, the young girls that are out there that are, again, just as you say, they're looking for content. They're looking to support something. They maybe don't want to support football, or they maybe not want, they want to support rugby, and they're now starting to see it, that there's a huge buy-in, and just as you say, the TikTok. I think for me, one of the biggest changes was TikTok sponsoring the Six Nations last year, and it really just drove a huge engagement within the sport, and all of a sudden you're starting to see these, the ticket sales going up and up and up for the games, and I'm incredibly pleased and really, really happy with what's going on, and hopefully the SRU, fingers crossed, the SRU don't muddle too much with it, and think, right, we're going to take it down the men's game route. Obviously pay them correctly, but I think if they don't have blinkers on with it and actually open their eyes a little bit more, you might find it becomes more and more something that everyone wants to go watch.
Yeah, I think that's it for me. That I think the SIU are ahead of the game than Wales or Ireland, just purely on the base that they've given them a name. I think that shows some commitment to growing a brand around it. I think my big concern would be that Ireland in particular have been notoriously slow with the women's game, and there have been issues in the Irish game. I think Wales less so, because I think they're obviously the president or the chief executive have come in very quickly and turned things around for the women's game in Wales and made it a priority. It's it's making sure, I guess, that we're not held back by the other nations. That if they're going to mess around and say we're going to take 2 seasons to build this up, that the SIU say, well, we're going to make a big play for joining the Prem 15s. And I'm sorry, but if you snooze, you lose, and if that leaves you out of it, tough. But we move. I think you really want to see from after the Six Nations firm plans, Johnny, for a regular professional women's rugby competition with representation from Scotland, whether that be that we join the Prem 15s because the other two are just too slow, or whether or not there is a mirror URC league. It needs to happen. The pace needs to keep going, I guess.
Yeah, and obviously what we all want, and we said this around the time of the end of the World Cup, is we're at a stage now where you cannot have amateur teams at the sharp end of a World Cup. So we want every country to come up with a serious, organised, professional women's setup. At the same time, we can't be beholden to waiting for other people to do that. You're right. So if these other countries can't keep up with us, we need to look after ourselves. We need to go and find a way to do it. I think what we do have on our side is the URC, because the URC have shown themselves to be very forward-thinking, really, really good with the branding and engagement and stuff. Obviously, having Rock Nation on board is a huge part of that. And I think they will be driving it. I think they expect now that this competition is going to kick on. And I would expect to see them putting pressure on Wales and Ireland. If Wales and Ireland aren't keeping up, to say, look, this is what we're doing, and you need to get your act together and be doing it.
Yeah.
It's just an exciting time. This weekend, you've got the Thistles playing. We've also got all the representative regions, under 16s and under 18s teams playing this weekend as well. So women's and girls rugby has really stepped on. And I was concerned when we did the review of the year. I was hoping for, more buy-in to the women's game, etc., especially at girls rugby, and a good pathway for the girls. It seems to have been there, and I wasn't aware of it, and it's working well, and I'm really pleased to see it happening.
Yeah, and I think that's it. This is what we were hoping for, isn't it? And this is great. It's kind of, I think what we might have expected was a very slow burn of we'll get some more contracts on the go. We'll do, we'll kind of get a few more players out playing in the Prem 15s, but to actually have a team that there is kind of good coaches going into and it's you've got Megan Gaffney and you've got experienced players in that squad as well, Craig. It's not just a kind of development squad from Scotland's point of view. There are good players in that squad.
Yeah, very much so. Including a big shout out for Molly Pullman from the How of Fife, who's come through from the juniors all the way through from P3 all the way through the How of Fife and through the Harlequins, and then she's gone down to Watsonians and plays in the development team for Scotland. So it's all coming together. We also, if you look at, even if anyone has looked at, you look at the Calais and the Glasgow and Edinburgh coaches for the under 16s and under 18s, there's some serious coaches there too. It's really exciting stuff to see, and fingers crossed it continues. So yeah, really, really good.
Is that it? I mean, I guess, is it, and you'll be able to answer this, Craig, that is it more exciting coaching women's rugby because it's new and it's fresh and they're excited, and it's not just the same kind of faces every year who are going through the motions. It's people who are new to the sport and new to, and there's a bit more of a buzz around it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. For me, it was I can only go with my experiences. My experiences were more, I wanted my club to be relevant, and I wanted to provide a place for all the women who are coming through the How of Fife to play rugby if they want to play rugby. And I think, and also Mrs. M was very much, why haven't we got a women's team, etc. So there was a bit of pressure on that side too. But I think looking at some of the coaches that are in the pathway now, there's some players who have either played for Scotland, women players who have either played for Scotland and are coming back to give back. And then there's also some development officers who have been involved in part of the SRU, and then they've moved on and they've come back to coach. But I think, to answer your main question, yes, that you don't have this constant, this is how we do it within rugby. This is how the men's game do it. You should do it this way. It's very much an open book. Obviously, you've got your set pieces and but you can go out and, you've got to try and bring players in. So you've got to come up with different ideas to attract players to your club, which includes using social media and opening it out that way. It's almost a blank piece of paper. And so, yeah, I found it very invigorating. I really enjoyed it. You also, and I'm not going to go into, women are different and men are different, but you got a lot more questions. Why are we doing this? Rather than just shout at someone that they have to go and run here and pass a ball here, they would say, well, why are we actually trying to do that? And it was really, just as an old coach and an old rugby player, it was invigorating to see people interested in why actually is that happening? Why are we doing that? Is it to do this? So yeah, you could probably tell by my answer that it's a really good thing to be involved in, and I do recommend it to anyone that's wanting to coach.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting times for women's rugby in Scotland, and indeed the world. Now we're coming to the 50 minutes left of the main podcast, and we'll do the Patreon one in a minute. I said at the start, was a trigger warning for the fact we are going to discuss Rufus McLean and his guilty plea for domestic abuse, and we're going to discuss that now. So that's just for anybody that doesn't, for whatever reason, understandably doesn't want to listen to that. That's what we're moving on to now. So for people who aren't aware, Rufus McLean has pled guilty to charges of domestic abuse against his former partner. And that has come out in a news report, and you can go and read it online. It's quite horrendous. It's the worst kind of abuse you could imagine. I mean, it's coercive behavior. It's direct violence. It's not easy reading. He's pled guilty. There's a couple of issues I think I wanted us to discuss, and I don't want to whataboutery about it. The first is, and I think this is the only way I can kind of think of us to tackle it is, if we go by the club response and the SRU response first, and then we can work into what does it say about underlying cultures in Scottish rugby and perhaps society in general. But the response, Johnny, I think, from Glasgow Warriors, understandably, as Dave said, he's suspended. There was a disciplinary hearing today, we understood, to decide his future. He's pled guilty. He's waiting sentencing. When I looked this morning, I found a pitch side interview with Rufus McLean from December and an article from November from the club's website in which Rufus McLean is the featured player interview. Now, I find it very hard to believe that Glasgow were not aware that he had a charge hanging over him and that he was due to go to court. It seems to me hard to believe that the first Glasgow heard of it was when the Daily Record reported about what had happened in court.
Yeah. When I saw it, and I think I was the first to see it yesterday. I think I passed it on to you guys. Initially, you see Glasgow's statement, and I was actually quite pleased with the initial statement, because the statement's very blunt. It's doesn't leave a lot of room to kind of think about it the wrong way or misinterpret it. It just says he's suspended. We have no time for this sort of behaviour. It's completely unacceptable. We're having a hearing. And I was like, great. That's pretty much, that's exactly what you want to see from your club when that sort of thing appears. And then obviously you read the news article, what was going on, when it was going on, when this all happened, and you start to think, all right, okay, there's actually bits here that don't really add up. And the fact that, like you say, they have the pitch side interview is still on the website. The date of that pitch side interview is interesting. The article with the interview with him is still on the website. Like it's not an onerous job to go and take that off the website. And I would have liked to have seen that happen by now.
So there's two scenarios I can see, Craig. All right. One is Glasgow knew, or somebody in Glasgow at the SRU were aware of what was going on, right? Because, there's only so many times you can claim he's going to the dentist or got some other reason he has to be off work before someone starts asking why he's constantly away. Because he's going to have to go to attend interviews with his lawyers, go attend court and stuff like that. So he would need time off from work to go and do that. So it seems like, one scenario is someone in Glasgow, the SRU, knew that was happening, but still didn't make the decision to place him on gardening leave, which lots of others, when you look across, look at what's happened with is it Mason Greenwood in Manchester United, there's precedent for that. You can just say to someone, look, until this is concluded, we'll pay you, but you're on gardening leave, and we'll see what the outcome is. There's precedent for that. And they have allowed him to continue to be used in media work. The other less plausible but still possible scenario is Glasgow genuinely didn't find out until it was reported in the press. But then someone in the club, whether it's a fellow player or a coach or whoever, must have known. It seems to me impossible that either the club hierarchy didn't know or somebody somewhere in the club didn't know that this was happening or had happened.
It's difficult because I think someone knew. Someone's got to have known, obviously, because of just what you said. He's going to have to go and attend interviews, and there's worst case scenario. The guys that he's friends with at the club may have been interviewed because they may have been out with him when he's causing problems, etc. The problem you have is legally, what do you do? Because obviously, my first thoughts are for the young lady that was involved in the issues that she's had to suffer. You also have the if he's saying he's not guilty for a period of time, then what do you do with him? Because do you just set him aside and say, well, obviously we have to be careful with this, so we're going to set you aside and garden leave? Or do we say, right, well, if you're pleading not guilty and we believe you, then you continue on at the club as normal? And then, so when did Glasgow know he was going to be that he's guilty, and when was the guilty plea being put in? That's probably the crux of the matter. On the other side of things, I think it's poor judgment to have him doing media work while he's going through this, because it's no matter, again, as we've talked about with SU, etc., the optics aren't good. No matter what happens, no matter who's. It must be awful for the person that's going through this that he's abusing, to see him, on YouTube, on TV, on the website, the SRU website, on the Glasgow website. So it must be a terrible thing to see. So it's really. It's an absolute minefield, and I'm glad there's more people out there that paid far more money than I am, or much more smarter than I am, to sort this out.
And the thing is, you're right. The way they've tackled it is that, like, if he's come to them and said, "Listen, this is happening. I didn't do it. I'm not guilty of this, and I will plead not guilty, and it will come out that I'm not guilty." I have no problem if Glasgow have no reason to doubt that, with them believing him. But you've also got to be careful, knowing that you don't know for sure. You can say, all right, we believe you, but also we probably don't want you being in interviews, being on the front page of programs, being on all of this until that's sorted out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this is the bottom line. From either one of those scenarios speaks of a wider cultural problem in society, but also within the SRU and the club, about the seriousness with which they've treated male violence towards women. Because the first reaction has been either, oh, it's all right, Rufus, don't worry about it. If you say you're not guilty, son. It's just, and almost like dismissed it. We'll worry about it later. You carry on playing because getting you playing for Glasgow is the priority. That to me is a massive cultural issue. You look at how other sporting clubs have treated alleged perpetrators of domestic abuse, and it's been zero tolerance. Fine, you say you're not guilty, that's fine, but we are not playing you. You can come and train. You can come and obviously they've got duties to them as an employee, but he didn't have to play for Glasgow during that period. And there's an easy line in that, it's just going for personal reasons. He's not playing for personal reasons. That's all they need to say. Nobody's allowed to dig into that anymore. That's all they needed to say. The other side is fair enough. Okay, let's say Glasgow didn't know until they entered the guilty plea. Somebody in the club knew. So there is a cultural problem then amongst the players that they, by their silence, are condoning the possibility that one of their, condoning the serious, I suppose, a lack of seriousness about the, male and female violence, that is somehow okay, that he's talked to his mates about it, and they've either been silent about it, or they're in on it in a kind of like, that's terrible, that's happening, and we're all sworn to secrecy. And I think that's for me. I think all I'm saying is that there are a lot of questions out of this, and I'm not accusing anybody of doing or failing to do anything. I'm just saying there are legitimate questions that need to be asked, and it's not enough that the Glasgow say we've suspended Rufus McLean, and everyone goes, well done, you put a lovely statement. Oh, they've sacked him. That's enough, because I think it needs to go further than that. Say, okay, who knew what when? What was the response? And if it's, well, the club didn't know, it's like, well, what did your mates know? What's their attitude? What's going on within the club? And to a certain extent, because some of this stretches back to when he was a youngster, even probably pre-Glasgow, what's the culture like in the school he's come from? And I'm not picking on private schools for anyone who gets into, that I would ask that question of any school he's come to. This is when you look at his behaviour and the behaviour that's described, it's not a little thing. It's not a grey areas at all. It is someone somewhere within a group that he is with has said that is okay, or has failed to say that is not okay. Because that doesn't just that behavior doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It comes from somewhere.
There's two things for me. First of all, if you talk to, well, not my group, but if you talk to any guy within a rugby club, and probably 99% of them, when you say, that person such and such has been abusing his wife or his girlfriend or a person in the street, you would expect, well, a lot of the guys I knew, and I've never come across this particular scenario, but when they were getting out of hand with certain things, they got a slap for it and told to settle down and don't do it again because it was dealt with within the team. That's the old way of doing it. What I'm more concerned about, and please, I'm not trying to downplay what's happened to this young lady and the awful thing that's happened to her. But if you look at Glasgow and I'm not just picking on Glasgow because there's other teams out there that have had this problem. There's one certain teammate who's celebrated for going out in a Batman costume and getting into trouble in a kebab shop, and that was violence. There was violence involved with that one, and it's not joked about, but it's almost he's a lad going out and going into a bit of trouble. And that's the sort of thing that needs knocked out, because I'm not saying that anybody's thought, oh, Rufus, he's got himself into a bit of trouble, put their arm around him. I'm not saying that. I just think that if it's all right to go out and get into a bit of trouble on a drinking night out, when you're having a go at when you're out as a team and you're physically violent to someone else, that's not okay. So it breeds, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, it's like it's a broken window effect.
Yeah. And I think on that side of things, and I'm going to say this, in my day, if someone was violent with someone, as a team, you sat them down and told them, if you continue to do that, you're not going to be involved in the team, and hopefully that would be.
I think the thing is,
it was never enough.
Craig, I agree, and I think that's certainly from talking to my dad, that's the kind of, it's a traditional kind of male attitude towards male on female domestic abuses. Or the lads went and had a word with them and it stopped, or the lads knocked it on the head. And
it never happened. It would never happen. Honestly, Cammy, that would never happen. You never stop someone who's a domestic.
No, exactly. I think that's the point. And it's not. I think that was the kind of traditional male approach to it. Was like, oh, you find it about, and everyone kind of says, oh, you don't do that. But I think that's it's an older, I suppose, understanding of what domestic abuse is, and some of the stuff in the Rufus McLean thing that's come out, I think, more speaks about attitudes towards women in general, maybe younger players. I think that's the issue. Is it's the day to day. There must, as I say, it doesn't appear from nowhere. That it's the day to day way that women, how are women talked about in the Glasgow dressing room?
Yeah,
how are women talked about in the school that he's come from? How are women talked about in his group of friends? Are they talked about as equals? Are they talked about as human beings? Or are they talked about as possessions to have and trophies to win? Because that's the problem. That's the small behaviours that are easy to dismiss, that build to, that then allow and permit, I guess, Johnny, the kind of horrific behaviour that then results.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. And it's kind of like what Craig says, it is about what sort of culture you have in your club. Like, if you allow small things like that, if you allow people to talk that way, then you're opening the door for, you're allowing people to go out at night and get into a scrap. And then once you've opened the door for that, then you open the door for the next thing, then you open the door for the next thing. So this is obviously the worst end of it that we've seen. This is horrendous what Rufus McLean's accused of. What, in fact, we don't have to say what he's accused of, what he's pled guilty to, what he has said he's done is awful, awful stuff. But it comes from allowing smaller stuff, and it's a cultural thing. From wherever he's been, he's been in a circumstance where things have been allowed that have then got to the point where he thinks he can do what he's done.
Yeah. And I think that's, you can speculate all you want about, what he'll do next and things like that. And I'm not particularly interested. I think, I'm one for believing in redemption, but I think probably he's shot his rugby career in the foot. I think, I'm not ruling out that anybody can be redeemed, but I think it's, as a lesson to others, there needs to be it needs to have a lasting impact. Something like this is serious. And I think the kind of people saying, oh, well, if he goes and does a course, or it'd be a shame to see his rugby career go. No, it's not a shame to go. You wouldn't, other crimes, people would quite happily say, well, that's it, he's done. And domestic abuse is no different. And I think it's those kind of attitudes, and it's those kind of, the whataboutery, I think, diminishes that. And so I don't think we're being, I think some people have said it, particularly on Twitter and Facebook, we've been overly critical of Glasgow and the SRU. And I don't think we're being critical. We're just raising legitimate questions that this cannot be the end of the process. It can't be just, oh, Rufus McLean's gone, problem solved. He was a bit of a bad apple. That something has happened somewhere. And I think it's hard to believe that there hasn't been something going on at the club. Now, whether it's amongst younger players, whether or not it's a small group, I don't know, but you would hope the club would do something about it. And I don't mean a sticking plaster of, we'll get somebody in to talk about male on female violence. We'll do a white ribbon campaign for a couple of months, and then we'll hope it goes away. Like some root and branch, what's going on here? how has this been allowed? How have we got to a point where someone's been convicted of this before someone has called out the behaviour before that? And that's the worry for me.
Yeah, I think it's for me. You can. I'm probably going over what you just said, Cammy, but just in my mind, you can cut the cancer out and get rid of it, but it's the after effects of that, and it's understanding. You almost, God, I want to say something here. I'm trying to be. You owe it to the person that he has been abusing, to understand what has been going, how the club how this has happened, and how if there has been anything within the club that has not helped him, but not covered it up, but just kept it under the public eye, and understanding why he's been doing it, understanding why he thought he could do it, and what was the role within the team and the club, that almost it's been in there somewhere, and someone's, just as you say, someone's known about it, and it's understanding that it's not right, it's not, and if he has lost his career over it, that and rather than saying, "Oh, it's a shame for him, he's lost his career over a mistake," it's not a mistake. It's a human nature thing. That's been, he wasn't born that way, Yeah,
and I think that's the thing for me, Johnny. Kind of just before we kind of wrap the discussion up, is it's not just Glasgow, because Rufus McLean has come through systems within Scotland, and one, there's the players, but there's coaches as well. So how what we don't know is has it been known that Rufus has this within him, and it's been an issue with him, and coaches have gone, but he's a good player. He's one of the better players. We'll ignore that side of it. Do you know what I mean? It's not causing us it's not causing a problem in camp. Or one of the lads have said one of the lads have said he's shouted his girlfriend on the phone. We'll not worry about it. It's not our problem because he's our best winger, and we don't want to rock the boat. That's the kind, and again, that's a question. I'm not saying anybody's done that, but it's the kind of thing I think is a sign of good corporate health would be that the SLU would want to look into the structures he's come through to understand whether or not it could have been picked up earlier, because perhaps there was an opportunity where Rufus McLean's career could have been saved by someone saying, "This isn't right, we need to help you and support you to change your behavior and your attitudes." And that's so how long is it's again inconceivable that he's hidden that part of him for so long.
It's a real sort of who knew what when. Like he signed his professional contract in June 2020, and this was, according to the news article, already going on by then. It's according to the news article, it stopped in January 2021. He was named in his first Scotland squad in January 2021. So there are some bits and pieces where, again, we can't say for sure. You don't want to jump to any conclusions. We're saying we don't want to hear what aboutery from people saying, what about his career, what about his redemption, whatever. We don't want to make it look like we're saying, oh, well, so how did Scotland not know about this? How was nobody involved? But there are bits of his career that overlap with bits of these incidents, and you would want to know who was involved, what they knew, and when they knew it, I think. And you're right, it's good corporate health to say, listen, this is what we found out. This is what we got from our investigation, because otherwise you're leaving the door open for people to say, all right, well, how come you signed him to a professional contract whether this is happening? Did you really not know? How come he miraculously stopped apparently when you announced him in a Scotland squad? How did you not know then? Like that's the sort of things that people are going to want to know.
But there is and someone's made a very, very good point in the conclusion, in the comments, I should say. And what we also have to remember is that a lot of domestic abusers are like ducks or swans in the water, and people around them do not know it's happening, and it's very hidden, and so there could be there's a very, very good chance that his team, a lot of his teammates knew nothing about it.
And that, I think we can be open to that possibility. I think it's more about I guess it's about finding out the underlying culture in which this was allowed to happen. So maybe he was hiding it, but there was something that has given him permission. There is a culture somewhere that's given him permission to do that. That might not be within the club, it might not be within the SRU, but somewhere along the line there has been a culture that has given him permission to act in this way and believe it's okay. I think that it could be, we get you do an SRU investigation and say this was one bad. We've really looked into this. We're happy with. We've spoken to a number of players. We've spoken to coaches, and this was never known about. The people with no vested interest, past players, whatever, have spoken about the positive culture towards attitudes towards women in the dressing room, and this is just one person who's is an exception to how everybody else behaves in the club. That's a possibility. We're not closed off to that. But I think when it's something this serious, I think if the SRU wants to show that it's very serious about women's rights and very serious about male on female violence, which is a big issue in society, then it needs to do something just to check that this isn't, what influence circumstance may have had on the outcome. And it might be nothing. It might be this is, like I said, it's an exception. It's a one-off, and that's fine. But I think if they're serious about it, they would do more than just we'll sack him and hope that's the end of it. That they would do some further investigation into it.
Yeah.
So, if you have been affected by anything, whether you are a woman, whether you're a man, gay, straight, trans, and it's an issue you want to talk about or as affects you, you can contact Scotland's Domestic Abuse Helpline, which is 0800 027 1234. So it's 0800 027 1234. It is an issue that affects everybody and all parts of society, and there are places you can go to get help and support if you need it. That's the end of the main podcast. What we're going to do is we'll go over to Patreon now after a short break for those patrons. We'll have our Patreon episode where we're going to talk about we might touch on this a little bit more. If Johnny wants to vent a little bit more, we can do. Otherwise, we'll be talking about the Scotland men's squad and any other kind of hands in the ruck that we have. For the moment, though, for this week, it is goodbye from me, a good fry from Johnny and Craig.
Bye, all.
Bye, all.